Welcome to the Inspired Evolution, and it is such a treat to be here today with Steve Cotter. Steve, how are you?
I'm fantastic, brother. Thank you so much.
It is such a treat to have you here. Right, so for those tuning into Steve for the first time, this is a man with a bit of a legacy. For more than 30 years, Steve's promoted mind-body fitness around the world through martial arts, qigong, mobility, flexibility, and kettlebell training. Remember that, kettlebell training, right? And via AKKF educational courses. Steve works tirelessly to share the power of kettlebells far and wide, and his efforts to reach his art form has globally impacted the growth and popularity of kettlebell training all over this planet. His physical feats of power led him to be named Men's Health magazine, by Men's Health magazine as one of the top 100 fitness men of all time. And the crux of all of that, the yummiest part of all of that is that he has this real clear communication ability to break down the complex ideas, and that's what's brought him global recognition as a fitness educator, leading hands-on trainings to thousands of fitness professionals in over 60 countries. He literally wrote the book on kettlebell training, and his landmark encyclopedia of kettlebell training DVD series is IKFF.
The Encyclopedia of Kettlebell Lifting is the DVD series. IKFF is the organization.
Provided foundational instruction for countless trainers who learned how to use kettlebells through his teachings. More than anything, Steve loves to teach and share his unique experience to promote health, happiness, and longevity through fitness. Man, such a treat to have you here.
Thank you, brother. Love to be here.
We could go anywhere with this. It's like, even on the chat over
Let's do it.
There was so much depth in just the conversation and the awareness of things that are going on. So first of all, I'd love to maybe let's start from a place of why does fitness become such a big part of your life? Like, where did wellness become such a big part of your life?
I'm an artist. I'm a movement artist. By trade, my foundation is in the martial arts.
Yep.
And essentially, the study of the martial, which is the warfare, is so that we don't have to fight. Yeah. So it's to have a tool and not have to use it rather than to need it and not have it.
Yeah.
And so it's really the art is what I resonate with more so than the martial, because I'm a peaceful, loving individual.
Yeah.
But my foundation's in the martial art. I was exposed to the Taoist internal martial arts, what's sometimes called Taoist yoga, which is Kung Fu. But it's not from the Shaolin tradition. It's from the indigenous China, which is the Taoist tradition.
Right.
And that was my upbringing in physical culture. And so in that formative years, starting from 12 years old, and that became my first profession, teaching martial arts professionally, till I was about 30 years old. Yeah. And the fitness is a component of that, certainly the physical conditioning, and other components is the mental refinement via meditation, via qigong, study of the healing arts, and I resonated very strongly with the physical training. Now I'm 48 years old, so this is most of my life now. And I got to a point in my late 20s where I realized I wasn't going to teach martial arts as a profession for the rest of my life. And so I was thinking about what's next for me. And it was a natural extension into fitness, because I had just grown into the habit of training literally all day, every day as a kid. That was my job. I wasn't really doing anything else. So I formulated the habit of essentially, from wake to sleep, training and teaching martial arts. And so when I looked at a profession and looked at the education that was available, it so happened my hometown of San Diego has a really good program in kinesiology at San Diego State University.
Amazing.
So I went through that program, and then from there, the logical step was going into personal training. And, I had a lot of hands-on experience teaching, children, adults, seniors. And so I was very comfortable in developing the communication skills, and I was very experienced in terms of the nitty gritty, the hands-on, not so much in the theoretical, but the application. Yeah. And so that was a natural segue into the fitness. I was an early adapter into kettlebell training when it became sort of a phenomenon. I mean, kettlebells has been around for several hundred years, but it was really pretty much exclusively to the Soviet culture. Yeah. And Around 2001 is, Pavel is sort of the godfather of the modern kettlebell movement. I was one of his early adapters that kind of saw the kettlebell, and it resonated with me. And this makes sense from a martial art point of view because it's holistic. You're using the whole body versus bodybuilding where you're just isolating.
Sure.
And because of my extensive physical training, I was able to really pick up the foundation of the kettlebell pretty quickly. And I had a lot of experience already teaching in the martial arts. So I was able to, be in a position of leadership in the kind of formation of the early kettlebell community in the U.S.
Amazing.
And, really from there, I was really the first guy to start bringing kettlebells all around the world because I saw that Pavel had a really strong following, but he was really focused on the U.S. and people would have to always go to Minnesota if they wanted to, be certified and be trained.
Right.
And I saw the opportunity to kind of bring it around the planet. And so since really about 2007, that's occupied a lot of my energy and a lot of my time, where I've taught in over 60 countries in this time. And it stems from my desire to liberate the consciousness of humanity, which is part of my path.
Yeah.
And, so there's a physical component, but what I've evolved to understand is that everything is mental. So everything is mind, everything is training of the consciousness. However, the body has its significance because this is our vehicle. This is where we live at this time in this place. Therefore, we have to take care of it, just as we have to take care of our car and change the oil and rotate the tires so that it performs. The same is true with the body. And so the fitness gradually evolved into a focus on health and has continued to evolve into a focus of well-being, which I defined as health happiness. Which is essentially, well-being is more encapsulating because fitness in and of itself deals with the physicality. So we could say someone's fit based on a certain metric or perhaps based on an appearance. If it's maybe a bodybuilding viewpoint, like, they have a toned muscle, so they're fit. If it's maybe a perspective of an endurance athlete, they have a strong VO2 max, so they're fit. If it's from the perspective of a weightlifter, this guy can lift heavy weights, so they're fit. What I observed is that in many cases, a person can be fit but not be healthy. And so they could show certain external parameters of fitness, but internally they may be miserable because of certain lifestyle habits or largely because of beliefs. And so I evolved my system to recognize fitness as a component of something larger, which is health. And health being a greater priority. As I like to say, health is wealth. And it's impossible to evolve to our highest potential, which I call health happiness, without the health. Because we could, let's say if we were to lay out our lives in different categories, which we would consider important, most people would say their physical health, their family, their relationship, their profession, their beliefs or activities that they're involved in, whether it's charitable or community causes. And so optimally, if we have an optimized life, we want to be able to have success in all of these important regions or areas. And so the health has its component. However, the end goal being we want to be present. The end goal is we want to be present and gracious for the fact that we have the opportunity to create, that we have a body to exist within. And removing health from that equation, I don't believe it's possible. Because if you have all the money in the world and all the legacy and everything else, but your body is deteriorating, ultimately you can't truly enjoy and gain the benefit of the grandeur of life. And, so that's sort of my evolution and what I've done. The movement, and so as I said at the beginning, I'm a martial artist in terms of my traditional training. However, I communicate as a movement artist because we all apply martial, but not necessarily in the context of our ancestors from generations ago. The original tribes, they used sticks and stones and, the fastened spears and swords. And then it evolved in a few hundred years ago, gunpowder. And so now you have projectiles. And now we have this, where someone could push a button and create massive devastation. So, martial in the sense of, okay, we're going to duke and fight. It's really a low level of understanding because, the highest level, The Art of War, which is a famous text, not only in the martial art, but used in business training and so on. Essentially, to paraphrase a chapter from The Art of War, it says that the highest level is not to win 100 battles in 100 engagements. The highest level is to win without fighting. So ultimately, we develop the skills such that we have the personal power. We don't have to cross hands. I don't even have to get to that point because I've developed the awareness to measure the environment such that I understand that, the energy here, maybe I'm going to go this way instead of going that way. And I completely evade the situation. And that's
written really early in the book as well. So it's like a fundamental.
Yes, it's a fundamental. However, my point is that we may not necessarily fight with sticks and stones and punch and kicks on a regular basis, but we still have to fight mentally. We still have to engage discomfort. We have to engage injustice sometimes. We have to stand up for things that we believe in. So this is a mental warfare in a way to speak. And but the focus is not on the martial, it's on the art. And it's the art of essentially the yin and the yang, so that we learn to embrace the warrior so that we can fully develop the peaceful component of ourselves. So we have the, life and death live side by side. And movement art is something that resonates with all people. Because if we look at kettlebell, not everyone can do kettlebells. Kettlebells is really an intense type of tool. It's an extension of the hand, but it's contraindicated for certain populations. Maybe someone has an injury or they're physically not strong enough to start doing this intense exercise. So I look at what are the common denominators. Well, everybody has a body.
Yep.
Everybody moves. And most fundamental of all, everybody breathes.
Yep.
So the first technique and the last technique is breathing. And, my own approach as it's evolved, when I was a younger man, I was really into the training and volume and, doing as much as possible and more the next day and more the next day, because more is better. That was the idea. And you have the benefit of youth and time. And that's evolved to essentially, I don't work out. People ask me, what kind of workout, what's your workout look like? And it's like, well, today it's this, tomorrow it's something else. But what I do is I move every day.
Yep.
And how that movement looks, it may be very intense. If I want some intensity, maybe I'll do some kettlebells. It may be more passive. Maybe I'm doing some mobility or some yoga type of stretching movements. Always training some form of meditation. And so, my work, my role, currently is that I see that we're moving into a time where there's an intersection of the man and the machine. So some folks refer to this as the singularity, right? The point in time in which the man and the machine are now at this point, and maybe the machine starts surpassing. And so, I think about how is this going to look? How is the world going to be 20 years from now, a generation from now? And what I realize is that our way forward is through our consciousness. Our way forward is through our heart, because the heart is able to resonate. I'm not sure the exact number, something like 50,000 times more than the mind in terms of the electrical energy. And so we cannot think our way out of these challenges. We have to learn to love our way through these challenges. This is what I believe. So essentially, if this was a 1-minute conversation, what is it about? It's about love. It's only about love and nothing else. And now the particulars is how I express it. This is my art. And how you express it is through your art. But our art is how we share our experience, we share our passion, and we essentially connect with all, because it's a recognition of the interconnectedness of all things. And I extend that not just through humanity, but to include the animals, to include the earth. For that reason, I'm a vegan. I'm a strict vegan in the sense that I don't have to kill to live. And it's not necessary in the modern world because I can gain nutrition from, we essentially evolved from hunter-gatherers, but more appropriately said, they're gatherer-hunters, because if you're in a region as a tribe, you're going to gather the available foods. Now, depending on that region, you may have more abundance. There may be fig trees and, berries that you can pick and fruit trees, or it may be more barren where now you have to start hunting. You got to move around and locomote. And so you got nothing else to eat. You're going to chase that animal and catch it so you can feed your tribe. But you're not going to go through all that effort if you can just pick a piece of food off a tree and eat it.
Of course.
So the point is that where we're at now with the global economy, we can get an avocado from California in Estonia, right? Yeah. And, so anyway, the point is that the idea of an interconnectedness of all living things is really important to me. And my role through fitness is to help individuals recognize their power, their own internal power. So essentially, it's teaching mindfulness through movement, which in some regards can be considered an evolution of mindfulness, because in the Taoist, there's a saying of movement within stillness, stillness within movement. And so even when we're completely still, we're not completely still.
Everything's spinning.
There's movement of cellular structure vibrating. And so when we move, we want to be able to move with the stillness. In other words, we have stability within the fluidity. And if we're just focused on sitting in one place in cubicles, and, now we're all on smartphones, we're all on computers. And so this is not necessarily progressive in terms of our physical state.
Sure.
In a lot of regards, it's deconstructing the human form. We're developing this sort of entropy where we're just kind of over our, and we need to balance that. And so even people with very powerful minds that are able to manifest very quickly through consciousness, without the physical, the word I would use is vitality. Without that physical vitality, we are not going to be able to be fully optimized in our expression.
Yeah. I love that. There is so much to talk to in that. Let's flow from vitality, because for me, fundamentally, it's a word that encompasses a lot. And for me, vitality is actually, we were having this conversation about words, and I've actually started putting together the first drafts on a book called Vitality. And for me, it's hidden in the word, like the word vital. How vital are you to existence, right? And so my whole agenda through the podcasting is trying to support people, like as we discussed, trying to get people aligned to their purpose and their health and their vision, and living in accordance to something that is so meaningful to them, just as you are. And so stacking story after story of people doing this, I'm hoping that people will be inspired to live a life that is on purpose and that is vital. And so I find that for me is the greatest expression of health, right? How vital are you to the natural order of things? Because creativity is the natural order of things, right? So how creative can you be? And how much are you like supporting your natural order? Because I fundamentally believe that we're all the universe looking in on ourselves, right? And so if I'm trying to be Steve, then I'm superfluous to the grand design of everything, right? So I need to be as much me as I possibly can, and that will facilitate the greatest amount of health. I firmly believe that. But in order to do that, I can't segment out, like you said, it's not like a mental, physical, emotional. It's like it's all one, and your work is part of your health, and like you do workouts. No, it's every day. It's different. It's like it's all interbled into one organism. So how are you showing up, and how does that like impact who you really are? And that is your vitality. And so I use vitality as the key word intentionally because it says how vital is your existence to creativity, right? So how vital is like and how creative then can you be? And that will support your health, because if you're in accordance with creativity, then you're healthy. Kind of deep, but that's kind of a reflection on the whole process. And that's why the Inspired Evolution basically exists. And the more people look at it, it's like, oh, he's trying to support people on purpose, but I'm driven by people's health fundamentally. And I love that resonance, because you're sharing that, for you, it's about liberating consciousness, right? And I'd love to deep into vitality and how that supports liberating consciousness a little bit further.
Well, within the vital is the I, and it's it, and it's all. It's all. So vital is, I think, a very powerful word.
Agreed.
And vitality, I agree. It's and I would say what you said in my own words is that all things are energy. Our existence is energy. Our forms of currency, the currency is energy. Some say money is energy. So there's different manifestations of energy, different densities of energy. Quantum physics essentially has led us to understand that which we perceive as solid is not solid in a real sense, it's rapidly vibrating matter that we perceive to be solid. And so everything ties into our belief system, again, our consciousness. What's consciousness? Well, Kan is with, and Shas is science, so it's with science, or Kan can also be against, right? So it's so vitality is fundamental to the engine of our existence, our being. Without vitality, there's not the drive to, as you say, create. There's not the drive to share energy, to manifest energy, because the nature of energy is it transforms. Energy transforms. It's not a static.
Dynamic.
And so the way to get more energy is to be more energetic, is to function with more purpose, with more effort. Not necessarily effort, but more intention, more focused. Take the effort that we're already putting, but focus it more so that it's going in a certain direction rather than being diffused. This is where meditation comes in. And so applying the meditation to movement, so the movement becomes purposeful. And we have an understanding of how we carry ourselves in space, which involves interaction, engagement, and conversations and communities. It involves our daily activities, being able to form and do the things that you want to do. And this is our nature, to be dynamic. And the modern lifestyle has sort of led us to be less dynamic in many regards in terms of our physicality. We're very dynamic in our thought processes, but physically we are sitting in cubicles more and more. And what I like to teach in many of my movement courses is that, exercise is a modern invention. Our ancestors didn't exercise. Our ancestors worked.
So insightful.
And so the reason why we exercise is because essentially in the modern lifestyle, we are not working in the way that our ancestors work with our body. We work with our mind, but more and more it's in the digital world.
Totally.
And so we have to exercise to counteract the negative consequences of the modern lifestyle, because our anatomy, physiologically speaking, our genetic material is essentially identical to our ancestors from 10,000 and more years ago, but our lifestyle is completely different. And so there's a big disconnect between our natural order and how we actually interact with the environment. The fact that, paved roads, for example, and this idea about, shoes, and Nike and other shoe companies, but especially Nike, they branded the idea and created the marketing concept of a performance shoe. But there's no such performance shoe. The performance is in the structure of the foot itself, and the shoe essentially can act like a cast. And so modern humans that grow up wearing shoes all the time, they often have very weak feet because the muscles of the feet are inactive. And so in recent times, probably the last decade, there's more of a movement towards barefoot training. But if we go back to the study of human evolution, the earliest shoes were essentially for protection. It was just to protect against climate,
weather,
protect against, certain terrain, sharp walking on rocks. So we just have thin covering of the feet.
Yeah.
And it was only in really modern history, since maybe the early 70s, that this idea of a performance shoe, where you started padding the shoe and, now we're running on air type of thing. And, so we're finding that what is old is new. We're starting to reconnect with our ancestral,
like a renaissance.
intuitive knowledge that we sort of forgot and come back to. And there's many examples of this. Another example would be, for example, the squat in a fitness. The squat is usually promoted as an exercise. As I teach, the squat is not an exercise. It's a fundamental human movement pattern.
Yeah.
So, and even today, if we look at less industrialized parts of the world, obviously U.S. and Australia and Western Europe, we're not going to see this. But if we go to rural areas of Indonesia, for example, many places in India, for example, we'll see people that are just in a rock bottom squat. They're not sitting in chairs all day, and they're working from a full squat position, and there's no back pain
at all.
And everyone in the West, we're sitting in chairs and we're driving like this, and we're eating like this, and we're working like this, we're watching TV like this, we go to the toilet like this, and almost everybody has low back pain. So there's probably more than a correlation there. There's probably certainly some causation as well. However, the idea is that we don't need to learn how to squat. We simply have to remember. And so a lot of it is unlearning bad habits versus having to learn anything new. And the evidence of that simply is to look at a child. A small child, maybe a 2-year-old child that's learned how to walk. They drop a toy, they're going to drop into a perfect rock bottom squat with an upright spine and pick it up. And there's no training to that. This is just a natural movement. And somewhere along the line, after, so at the age of 5, we're set in cubicles in our neat little lines, and we're taught to follow the authority, follow the external authority, and do as you're told, and, don't talk back or make an example of yourself so you'll get chastised. You want to fit into the corporate kind of structure and rules, as Vishen so eloquently coined. Bullshit right rules, and so you start maybe 5 years old for 30, 40 years sitting at these right angles, and then your body at some point forgets how to function. And then we start deteriorating because we're not living in harmony with our natural order. And so again, in the squatting, let's understand what's restricting you from doing what you once did and naturally already know how to do, versus me trying to teach you how to do it. I don't have to teach you how to breathe. I don't teach you how to walk. Don't need to teach you how to squat, but you have to remember if you've forgotten.
There's this really deep groove that we can ride here with remembrance and forgotten. So there's this whole essence of like being disconnected and almost being trained to be disconnected from our natural expression in our bodies and stuff like that. And then also the process of then recovering is about unlearning all that, like all the rules that have been implanted on top of us. And that is obviously manifest in the physical, in the way where the world is calling us to be more in cubicles and on our phones or on our PCs and all that sort of stuff. But then there's also the aspect of also the spiritual side to that. It's like, do you feel like we come pretty whole, and then, or do we get more whole as we go along the journey?
It's like the chicken and the egg kind of question.
Yeah.
I suppose if there's a disconnection, then there's a reconnection. And so if there's a memory and we lose it, then we need to remember. Remember. But if we don't forget, then there's nothing to remember because we're present.
Yeah.
And it's, as the saying goes, we forgive and forget. But it's forgive and forget. Right.
Because you touched a lot on presence and grace as well. And I was fascinated by that. Just how, because I'm a big fan of context as well, and you bring a lot of presence. If anyone spends a moment with you, you can see how present you are in the situation. And there's a lot of grace with the way you move and the way you even articulate yourself. It's really poetic to watch. Where does presence and grace come from for you, and how does that interconnect through the dimensions of mental, physical, and emotional? I
think in simple terms, it's the focus is love.
Yeah.
In the sense of self-love, in this case, a recognition of the self and acceptance of the self. And there's a grace in that.
Yeah.
There's a grace in that is when we, in a sense of using the term whole, when we are recognize who we really are and we are acting out what is within us, the true self, not the mirage of what we think people want to see or what we think we're expected to show, but rather the true expression of that individuality. And within the individual is the divine, within the divine is the I. And so the idea of getting try to simplify this, but the idea of presence or grace, I think relates to presence, relates to recognition of who you are as an individual and the speaking of that and the walking of that. And, if it's a movement, I'm a movement artist. So the way I express my movement, even though I consider myself a conscious being and on some level an intellectual, I don't identify as an intellectual because my work is in the field. I'm with the people. I don't want to be in the academic world where it's about theory and discussion. I want to be, okay, let's put it to the test. And that's the martial artist in me. Yeah. What's the function? How do we use it? Is it useful or is it archaic? Because if it's no longer useful, then there's no space for it because we're becoming minimal. I don't want to have to carry a big suitcase. I want a very light bag. So I'm just bringing the things that I need so I can move around easily. Yeah. And, so my background in terms of the martial art and through the form, so the expression of the animal movement, there's an intention. Every movement has a particular application. There's a meaning behind the movement or within the movement. And it actually tells a story. And so having this recognition of what the movement application is, this gives us a grace and a presence in the movement, contrasting that with the idea that I need to burn calories because I'm trying to lose weight or I'm trying to, get more defined. So I'm going to, go on the treadmill and just, burn X number of calories, but I can watch TV and read the paper while I'm doing it because it's drudgery and I hate it. And I don't really want to be doing it, but I'm doing it because I think I'm supposed to do it because I'm trying to lose some weight and I need to burn this number of calories to do that. That's one approach, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's not really leading to anything. It's sort of a dead-end street. Yeah. As compared to now, okay, this movement is for the purposes, I'm learning to come up and under something, or I'm learning to kind of go over it and then talk, or whatever it happens to be, or I'm learning to kind of rotate and evade something. Function. And so now the movements have an intention, and it becomes an expression of moving meditation. So where there's no separation between thought and action, there's a true integration of mind, body, and spirit. When we say mind, body, spirit, it's really associated a lot with the martial arts. Mind, body, and spirit. It can be innocuous or it can be difficult to quantify. What does that mean? Because the word spirit has an impactful resonation, and it can mean, the same word can mean different things to different people. So I like to say mind, body, and breath. Yeah. Because now we can understand exactly what we're talking about. Okay, we understand the body because this is very tactile. The mind, we recognize a sense of the mind in terms of our conscious awareness. And the breath, we know what that is. And so if we're essentially harmonizing the breath with the movement, now we're integrating the mind, the body, and the breath. And so the mind and the breath work together. We could say that the breath is the connection between the mind and the body. And so rather than kind of being over here and I'm thinking about, man, I got in an argument with my wife and, she mad at me and, but I'm doing this with rather than that, I'm completely present in whatever I'm happen to be doing, whatever movement I'm doing. It doesn't matter what the movement is. It just matters that I have an intention. And, this is very empowering. And now we become artists in how we're expressing ourselves through movement, through art. And that's one of the most raw forms. I mean, we could say that dance is maybe even a more raw form, but things like dance and movement are as stripped down essential as we can get.
Yeah. I love it. And so, again, just to anchor that in, so you're cultivating this to liberate consciousness so that you can be as present as possible, so that you can move. What does liberate consciousness mean to you?
Well, I'm a freedom fighter, actually. I'm here because I choose to be, not because I have to be, because I've recognized the fallacy of death. There's no such thing as death. It exists only as an idea. In the sense that we are energy. We occupy the body for a certain amount of time. It's temporary in that sense. Yet there's some other component of ourselves, which I refer to as the non-physical. Some will call it the soul. Some will call it the spirit. But again, this is very vicarious. We can recognize intellectually that there's that which we cannot define via our sensory awareness. We can't see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, hear it. Maybe 100 years ago, well, it doesn't exist. If I can't touch it and see it, then it doesn't exist. But we're too far along. We're not so blind anymore. So we understand there's probably more that is outside of our sensory awareness than what we experience through our senses. And so the idea of death is very limiting to a lot of people, the fear. And, so really it's about overcoming fear. It's about facing fear and going through and recognizing that there is nothing to fear, that it's all experience. As the saying, the famous, I guess JFK is the one that made it probably famous, and there's nothing to fear but fear itself. I think that was JFK. So that's a truism, I believe. And, so when I say I'm a freedom fighter I'm very sensitive to the suffering of others. And that's part of my story. That's part of my experience. And myself, I'm very lucky. I feel been blessed with very good karma. I haven't had a lot of suffering personally, but I've been associated with different important individuals in my life that have had a tremendous amount of suffering. And, this awareness is what led me to become a vegan, because I became very dialed in to the suffering of animals. And if one has a world-centric viewpoint, which I have adapted and I agree with, and I guess I think Ken Wilber is the philosopher who is sort of coined or developed what's called the unity model. And so if we go from egocentric, I'm just concerned about myself, to ethnocentric, is I'm just concerned with people that look like me and speak the same language and live in the same region. And we evolve beyond that, beyond the building the walls. And we realize, wait, we're dealing with, I have friends in Australia and I'm on a phone call to China. And, we look a little different, and some people's eyes are more almond shaped and some are more round, and the skin might be lighter or darker and the tongue is different. But at the essence, we're brothers. There's only a few tribes. We're all related. And we start to recognize that we're not different. We're not different. We have the same fundamental needs and desires. And now we started really extending that. Now we have to understand our place. We share the world. It's not just about humans. And, so now the animals and the trees and the plants. And if someone believes more from an Abrahamic tradition of that, man is responsible or given dominion over all things, I think there's a huge misinterpretation of what that word dominion means. I think it is generally interpreted as domination, meaning man has the right to control other things, but actually the actual interpretation is responsibility for. So when we switch that, we understand that, because I have the capability of mastering someone else, this animal, I can shoot it, or I can shoot it with an arrow, or I can take the woman and grab her by the hair and throw her in the kitchen. Because you have the physical strength to do that, that's not dominion. That's weakness and insecurity and fear. Rather that, I'm strong. So how can I use this strength to help everyone? Because the ship is going to leave when everybody's on it. So it does no good to be first on. You got it better to, the strong one needs to come and help lift the other ones that aren't so strong. So that's what I respect in a strong, not the person that can lift the heaviest weight. That's one expression of strength. But how are you going to use that strength to elevate humanity on whatever level? It doesn't need to be in a global thinking. It can be on a local, but what act of kindness? How can you use that strength to lift the person that doesn't have their own strength to do it? So the recognition of that is really what drives my purpose. And that's where the strength comes in. We need a certain amount of strength, enough strength to do our work, enough strength to have the courage to use our voice, enough strength to have the courage to live a life of purpose and not be distracted by the opinions of others, which is their issues, not your opinion of me is not my problem, right? So, and vice versa. Yeah. And, so have become very sensitive to the suffering of others. And even though myself, I have a great life and I have nothing that, everything is wonderful and I have a rich life, a part of me still suffers when I understand that my brother over here is suffering. So while I'm eating this luxurious meal and this guy has no food at all, I don't have the ability to let's just look away and pretend that he's not there so I can feel better about the fact that I have so much wealth here. Yeah. My sense is, how can I help this person? And the answer may not necessarily giving him some food, but the bigger answer might be to help inspire something within that person so that they can find their strength to move and achieve what is necessary for them to elevate. And that's the nature of biology, is to expand, to grow. And, so that's kind of where I'm at on a, I guess a humanistic level. And I'm using the fitness and the movement as a way to ultimately bring that message to empower the individual. Not to be, hey, look how cool I am, and here's my resume, and I did all these things, and you're here to see me. Rather, it's service. It's service, and we need to constantly go back to that and remember that. And it's the fruits of the labor, not the fruit before the labor. So we have to do the work to bear the fruits, and we have to sow in order to reap. We reap what we sow, and so we have to plant and do the hard work and dig, plant the seed and water it, and then the fruit. But if someone just comes along and picks the fruit, it's like, oh, this is so easy, right? Yeah. And then see the work that goes under. And so I respect, that's the reason why I respect and appreciate people that have a level of accomplishment in whatever their craft is. Not so much that you want to get a piece of that person, but rather because here's a person who's living in harmony with their purpose. And when we do that, we're able to manifest rapidly, and we're able to expand, and essentially it branches out. So it becomes a communal thing.
There's so much in that, and I really, you almost touched like straight into what I wanted to touch on then, which was humility, because there's been a lot that you've offered the world and shared, and we just touched on service. I'm just going to go ahead and ask, why the humility?
I don't consider it that I'm making an effort to be humble. Mm-hmm. I was brought up in a traditional Chinese martial arts system. Mm-hmm. And so there is a sort of a, in terms of practice, there is a sense of hierarchy in that, the instructor is the master. Mm-hmm. And so you show the respect. So kind of the traditional Chinese culture puts a lot of value on humility. Of course. The soft power versus the hard, the West is more of the hard power. Like, look how big and strong I am. And, the Eastern traditional, at least, is more of the soft power is, walk softly, carry a big stick type of thing. So at some level, that was my exposure to the environment of being humble. But, the bigger really response to that is my belief system is that I see the equality of things. I don't see accomplishment as an indication that someone is higher. We have different levels of skill. So depending on the subject matter, if in my area of expertise where I've done my 20,000 hours or my 30,000 hours of practice and teaching, then definitely that's where I can step forward and that's my authority. And, you should do what I say simply because I have so much experience. And if you don't listen, you're going to have to go the long way. And I can save you a lot of time just by doing it this way. Right. Yeah. But in the sense of the broader community sense, you might be famous and I might not be famous, but your fame is it's not something that gives you some hierarchy. It's equal parts blessing and curse. And so I simply don't resonate with the arrogance. It doesn't impress me, and in fact, it loses me. If someone is a great, especially in the athletic sense, if someone is a great artist, I respect the art, but then when they speak, it's all about their greatness. I'm not interested in that person. I'm not interested in following that person, and so in that sense, I'm never a fan. I'm not a fan until I know a person. And so certain athletes that I've trained over the years, I become a fan once I get to know them and I understand the human, not because of the uniform or that they're on TV, but because, hey, this is a really solid guy. And, I have a connection with that person. Now I'm a fan. Now I'm going to watch him. And, oh man, he hit a home run today. That's awesome. I'm really happy for him, rather than this fan culture. So I'm coming more from a culture of doing rather than a culture of watching. There's a saying that if you study history, and I study history because history is his story. And who is he? Well, he is the story of man. He is me. He is we. Me. All of us becomes we. And, so when we study his story, we see that, the great, when someone becomes too powerful, they essentially fall. So every empire, that had great power, and we see that in the world today in geopolitical, is certain regions of the world become so powerful that they essentially consume themselves from within. Totally. And, so this is always constantly going on in the cycle. But if we study, say, Western history, and we kind of trace back to the ancient Greeks, the Greeks were doers. They had the concept of the scholar athlete or the scholar warrior, to where it was equal parts academic, studying the sciences and mathematics and art. And music, and then it was equal parts the physical. And so the Olympics sort of came out of that. Yeah. And if you look at the evolution from there, moving to Rome, the Romans were a nation of spectators at the Colosseum. So we're going to sit around and watch the gladiators. You look at America, America is the modern modern day Rome. If you even look at the football stadiums, it's the same concept. We're all sitting, not just UK, I mean, the Western world in general. You see, soccer, you see.
The World Cup was just.
Exactly. So you see massive people sitting around watching other people do things. And that's just not where I'm coming from. It's not interesting to me because I want to be out there on the field. And, maybe you're not good enough to play on that field, but you play on your field, at your level, whatever that level. It's not important, the level. It's important that you're engaged.
And you're doing.
Yeah. And so, that's where I'm kind of coming from. So someone asked me, why am I humble? I'd say, well, I guess I'm humble. I believe it because people tell me that I am, but I'm not thinking in it from my point of view. Like I'm going to be humble.
Of course.
This is my nature because I respect clarity. I respect calmness. And there's a time and place. It's not to be without ego. It's to have the ego stays in its lane, not to get out of control. So the Taoist depiction was Lao riding on the back of a bull. And, so basically the ego is the bull. You want to just ride it. You don't want it to control. You want to keep it tamed and use the power of the ego. So there's a time and a place to not be humble. But it has to be balanced. But for me at a resting state, I'm more comfortable to just be humble because I don't need much. I grew up in simple and I feel I'm a very rich man, but I still don't need much. And I only need a little bit to sustain. So pretty much what I have is for others. I only need a little bit for myself, and some people really resonate with the arrogance, especially in the Roman culture, the MMA culture, where it's about, the one who talks the most and brags the most is the one that has the most fans. This is sort of a vicarious way of living, in my opinion. I think many people, they respond to this type of persona because they feel inadequate. And they see somebody that's out there in front saying, I'm great, I'm the best, I'm awesome. And it's like, yeah, that's really cool. I wish I could be like that type of thing. And most people don't do it well. The only one I think only Ali is the one that mastered that use of arrogance, but in a way, but he was a very deep and thoughtful human, and kind of the modern guy would kind of be probably Conor McGregor but I don't see that. And I don't know the guy. He's probably a really good guy. When I see him in interviews, he seems like a very grounded, I think he's a true martial artist, but the persona, it's not for me to judge. I'm not saying it's right or wrong because it seems like he's using it and it's benefiting him and he has the right to do that. But in terms of if I was going to tell my son, hey, here's someone to model after, that's not the model I want to follow. Instead, you're going to be a warrior, but you're a silent warrior. You're a ninja. So, they don't know you're there until it's too late, until they feel your breath in the back of their neck, not like, I'm coming. Well, you're a big target, when you act that way. So the mighty, you get too big, you're going to fall. And it's not about being afraid to achieve greatness. It's just that it's not for me. Because I'm here to serve. I'm here to, it includes me, but it's not only me, And, so it's not about whatever fame or recognition comes. That's not the reason for doing it. That's the way of the world. And we need a level of recognition to be able to get the message out. And so if I have to become more well known or have more fans or achieve more fame to do that, I accept that. But it's not the goal in of itself. The goal is the work. So the process and the goal is the same thing. The end point is just following along and continuing along. And what that looks like, don't know until you get there. I just know it's good.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing on that. Humility is one of my deepest, it's my deepest meditation and my consistent, one of my highest values was instilled by my father. Humor and humility. Two things that get you through absolutely everything. There's
a saying I think it's the Japanese, the samurai swordsmanship, but the traditional katana is the blade on one end, and the back side is blunted. And basically, the ego is the sharpened blade, and the humility is the tempered edge of the blade. So again, the ego and humility live side by side, or maybe ego and humility are not the parallels. Maybe it's arrogance, because ego is neutral. It's not positive or negative, but the arrogance is sort of taking the ego and allowing it to, the arrogance and the humility, I think, live side by side. And it's finding that balance. And I think how we express that has a lot to do just with the personality of the individual. So I'm like a cool, laid back guy. That's how I roll.
So true. I've got to ask a question. So as we're slowly coming here, like, what are the values or that you would love to instill into your son? Obviously, you would want him to be his own person. But if there is stuff that you would share, I guess I'm coming from the point on a question that I'd love to ask is, what is the message that is deepest to your heart? But we were just touching on, like, what you would want to see in your own son. So what are the values that you would like to see more of in other people, and what is the message? Well,
first thing, I really respect my son a lot. He just turned 15. I have two daughters and a son. My son's the youngest. So he just turned 15. He's exceptionally focused, exceptionally aware. And I see myself at that age, and I see him as much further along. His mother has a lot to do with that. His grandparents have a lot to do with that. Certainly I've contributed to that as well. I can't take the credit. The credit is his, but he's evolved into a tremendous person already. So I'm more of the idea of allow it. Don't be too hands-on in the sense of trying to direct it, because he's got his own life. But in terms of if I'm going to instill certain experiences that I have, which we could call wisdom, is move from love, be your authentic self, and look within. In difficult times, look within first and foremost. Being your authentic self is follow the life, do the things, make the associations that are meaningful, that feel, that give you fulfillment, and whatever that looks like. And it's not for me to try to direct that. I mean, we can observe that there's tendencies. We can observe. My son's really physical. He plays American football. He likes roller skating. He's very skillful with the kettlebells. Soon when he's kind of in summer football now, but kind of when the football season's going to be over, like November time, we're going to get into the jiu-jitsu so he can start training jiu-jitsu with me. Right now he's doing football every day, so there's no way to do that. But, so he's definitely moves in that direction. I think it's very likely that he might follow some similar path, at least early in his life, to kind of what I've done. And I'm sort of, I won't say grooming him, but I see that where he's at with his skill development, at some point down the road, maybe when I decide, I'm not going to go around and do all these seminars anymore. I think my son will probably be in a position to be able to, and he's already helped me a few times at different courses I've done and, helped me demonstrate and stuff like that. So but again, only if that's what makes him happy. So, that's really what I want for my children is, for them to be happy, for them to be fulfilled, and for them to recognize the power within themselves and I really see that generation is far more developed than my generation and generations before us. I think, the children certainly are, more accepting in terms of, differences compared to even like when I was in high school, there was a lot of cliques. I don't see that as much. And I don't know if that's maybe specific to the neighborhood where my kids live and their school, or if it's maybe, different in other areas. And certainly, this goes in both directions. So the kids that are like really good are amazing. And the kids that are kind of messed up are really messed up, I think extremes. But, in general, what I observe is that kids are a lot less, focused compared to my generation of kids. in terms of style, in terms of, personality, and you see a lot more of being friends with different ethnicities and, probably, sexuality or these types of things where, where not long ago these people would be chastised. They're not as chastised as much. Yeah. So I see that as a really positive development.
Progression. That
in general, kids without having to be told, are more world-centric than the previous generation.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's because they're being taught that. I think it's just part of the evolution of expansion of consciousness globally. So I see that as a really positive thing. And, I would say I learn as much as what I can teach. But, as far as one thing I can really speak on authoritatively is to follow your passion.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Love of the Inspired Evolution and sharing the Love of the Inspired Evolution. If you feel like this content has supported you or may support anyone else that you know may resonate with the content of it, please share away and share the love around. Thank you guys so much. And to stay up to date on whatever's coming out with the Inspired Evolution, please subscribe. There's all these links in the bio for you to tune into the episodes and all these different platforms, just so the message can get to you and your loved ones. Thank you so much for all your love and support. Stay inspired to evolve.